Thank goodness. Welcome, Zoomers. Welcome to the world famous Sail Power Steam Museum broadcast here tonight. This is pretty exciting. This is our 31st Zoom program now. We've covered so many different things, and it's such an exciting thing to do. All these old sea captains, you can see them down there at the bottom of the screen. They're all sea captains, every one of them. They're a motley looking group, but they're the captains of all the windjammers, all the ones that we've done Zoom programs on. So if you want a history of the Windjammers, uh, click on our website and chime in here. Check us out. My wife and I started this museum just 16 years ago, and it's been booming ahead over and over again ever since. So exciting to see it happen. And tonight we have a wonderful program for you, a very fascinating program. This one, uh, Rob Stevens is going to tell you about. It's about the first vessel that was ever built right here in Maine, the first vessel that the English built here on the shores of Penobscot Bay, well, the coast of Maine and its area. And it's this pretty little thing, cunning little vessel. Look at this thing. Isn't she cute? My God, she's got such a fantastic paint job on her. You'd swear she's doing 10 knots, but she's probably only making four. But it's just such a cunning little vessel. And we're so proud to be able to present this to you. This vessel, of course, was started down at the mouth of the Kennebec River. And when in the Pompey days, they settled down in that portion of the river, and they decided they would build a vessel. There were about 100 of them, and I'm sure Rob will tell you all about the details. But 100 of them down there, and they were going to take the Maine winter, and they were there for only one Maine winter, and I guess it drove them out. They said that's enough of that. The next year they went back and they took the vessel that they had built, this wonderful little vessel, this uh, uh, little gorgeous little thing, and they sailed across the ocean back to England. And of course, got a little homesick and sailed it back across the ocean again, back to the United States, back to North America. But anyway, we'll get into more of that as we go on here. And amazing part, of course, they settled in the mouth of the Bath River, the Kennebec River, and that was uh, the place where shipbuilding began. Just amazing. Here, this with this little pinnace, Virginia, the first ocean-going ship built right there in the mouth of the Kennebec River. And all of that culminated shipbuilding, and shipbuilding over the years until finally the mighty schooner Wyoming, the biggest six-masted schooner, the biggest wooden vessel ever built, was built right there on the shores, just a little bit to the north of where Plumpum put their first fort. Uh, Rob Stevens is going to tell you all about this, but hang on, Rob, hang on a minute. We've got one other thing I've got to interject here, and that's our commercial. So don't go away. We're going to have this commercial. Sail Power Steam Museum, wonderful rising star on the southern end of Rockland here. Up on the upper left, you can see our old building. That was the original building, and that building is right solid full of memorabilia now. We have so many wonderful things in there, absolutely incredible things. The vessel of Maine, of course, the schooner Bowden. We have a great big display on that. We have Nathaniel Bowditch's backstaff, and Nathaniel Bowditch, the father of navigation. Every seaman in the world knows Nathaniel Bowditch. We have his original backstaff there. We've got lots and lots of other, well, so many pieces of memorabilia there. I can't begin to tell you it all right here in the short space of what we're doing. In 2019, we moved a schooner up into the front of the yard to enhance the view. And by God, there we put it right in the ground, and you can come aboard that vessel. You can have your picture taken at the wheel, and I guarantee you'll never have motion sickness. If you're prone to seasickness, you won't have that vessel. I guarantee you won't roll. And down below, you can see our new building at the lower right-hand side there, where the old building got so full of memorabilia, we had to build another building. And we built this building right behind where they had the schooner. And it's a beautiful big building. In it, we have quite a number of other things. One of the things we do have is a pinnace. We had a little discussion earlier on what a pinnace was. I thought a pinnace was just a lightly built small boat, but Rob tells me that a pinnace could be almost any length of vessel. And as they built the Virginia, it's a very stout vessel, very strongly built. It's not a light built vessel at all. But there is another one that we have right in that new building, and it's called the Light Horseman. It was brought over here in 1605 by George Weymouth on a vessel called the Archangel. And it is a little light vessel. It's in two pieces, stowed in the bottom of that boat, brought over. They put it together here in Muscongas Bay and rowed all the way up Penobscot Bay back in 1605, discovered Penobscot Bay, and we have a replica, a full-size replica, about 30 feet long of it in that new building. Over on the lower left, you can see, oh my God, what's happening over here? Look at this vessel, hard over on its ear. My goodness, it's the schooner Bowden, the vessel of Maine, the recognized vessel of Maine. And there she is in 1923 on the rocks, way up in the Arctic. And this is so exciting because we have this program coming up in 2 weeks. Check our schedules, check our schedule, and make sure you sign up for that program on the 21st of this month. We're going to be doing a history of some of the trips that Macmillan took there to the north. This one in particular, the 1923 trip. Anyway, onward. We've got to continue on. I got to tell you about a little bit about one of the greatest things I think we've done in the museum. We have so many different things. We're reaching out in so many different branches. One of the wonderful things we do is our skiff program, SKFF, Sail Kids for Free. We take kids 8 to 14 years old and give them a free week-long sail training session. Look at these kids up in the upper left there. We graduated 145 kids from this program this summer, this past summer. 145 kids went through. They come not knowing anything about a boat. They don't know anything about a rudder or a centerboard. We teach them on Monday. We show them the rudiments. On Tuesday, they get a little experience in it, figure out which way the wind's coming from and how it responds and what makes it go. On Wednesday, they turn the boats upside down and right them again and bail them out and keep on going so they know what to do if they get in trouble. Thursday, they hone their skills a little bit more. And by Friday, they are true sailors racing each other out around the buoys. If they can't beat their competition, their buddies in the next boat, well, they turn around. Of course, they can't go faster. They can't do anything else. They run into them, but that's what they do. And they anything that works, you know. But what a great thing to do with your kids. Down there and across the bottom, you can see the kids. They're approaching the buoy out in the end of the race course there, and they're all ganged together, just tight as they can go, trying to outsail each other. That's what we do. So keep your eye on our progress. Sail a classic. If you we'd also do adult sail training. We teach them how to sail and we teach them how to hone their skills until they are very good sailors. We'll teach them navigation and all phases of boating. If you've never sailed, look at these beautiful little boats. That the one on the upper left and in the middle, that's a friendship sloop. And what a beautiful thing that is to sail. You got to come and try one of these boats. The one on the other side, a Herreshoff 12 and a half, absolute classic, well known all over the world, these little Herreshoff boats. We have two of those, two friendship sloops. We've got a couple of Beetle cats. We've got a J-22. We've got a whole pile of different boats. We'll teach you how to sail all different rigs, teach you how to sail all different kind of boats. One of the other things we do, we have our Sunday jam up in the upper left there. You can see every Sunday for 16 years, we have had every Sunday, summer and winter, a jam. And just the other day, we had 25 musicians in there, and we had about 40 people in the audience, and they had a stomping good time. It's completely free. Just come anytime between 1 and 4 in the afternoon. Have coffee, sit there. If you can't clap, if you can't sing, if you can't play an instrument, you can stamp your feet and clap. That's the idea of it. Up on the upper right side over there, there's a little friendship sloop sailing. You can see what a beautiful thing that is. Below it, there are the kids going around the buoys out in their little Optimus prams, those little things where they're racing each other. In the center of the morning in Maine, she's a big catch where we took people out for an hour's a 2-hour trip around the harbor and Penobscot Bay and give tourists a little taste of sailing. Down in the lower left is Grandpa teaching his son how to sail a little catboat right off the end of our dock. And down across the bottom, you can see we have a great big tent that we set up on the shore. And if you have any kind of a gathering, a wedding, or a party of any kind, get in touch with us. You can have lobster meal. You can have all kinds of anything you would like down there on the beach in right on the shores of Penobscot Bay. Wonderful things we have here at the Steel Power and Sioux Museum. And we can't do it without you. We thank you very much because with donations are very much encouraged and volunteers are more than welcome. Everybody's welcome to come and try and help us put this kind of show on the road. Well, uh, so much for that. Let's get back to our program tonight. The Virginia, of course, was built in 1607, Popham County. You can read down through that. And I'm going to call Rob in now. Rob's going to fill us full of all kinds of lore of the first vessel, first wooden vessel built on the shores of North America, the little pinnace Virginia. Hey, Rob, it's your watch.
There we go. Um, Hello, my name is Rob Stevens, and I was I guess, the lead shipwright on the Virginia. And the definition of being the lead shipwright means that everything that goes wrong is my fault and keep going, move on. Um, a little bit about the Popham colony or excuse me, a little bit about Maine's first ship is around 1997. We thought, well, that would be great to build a copy of the Virginia for the 400th anniversary. And so we were talking about, oh, well, it's the first, European ship built in the New World. And then it's like, oh, well, they were the Vikings. Well, and then, oh, geez, they were the Spanish. And then we go, well, it's the first ship built in Maine, but oh, geez, there was the boat built by Champlain on St. Croix. And so finally we got down to it's the first English built ship that sailed across the Atlantic voluntarily as opposed to escape. Next slide, please. And it was there were two backers of the colony. Sir John Popham, who was the Attorney General of England at the time. Doesn't sound like he was a very nice person. I think he liked to hang people. And the other person backing it was Ferdinando Gorges. And Fort Gorges in Portland Harbor is named after Ferdinando Gorges. Next slide, please. And 1605, King James set up the Virginia Company so that colonists could make money and give it to the king. And it was basically the first colony or the second colony or the southern colony, the northern colony. And you'll see in this map they overlap. And the reason they overlap is whoever was successful first got all that land. The northern colony, our colony, was called the Virginia Company of Plymouth, and is not the same people as the Pilgrims 15 years later. Next slide, please. Oh, next slide. Virginia, the reason why it's called the Virginia is everything from the Carolinas to New France. The English called it Virginia after their Virgin Queen. This was not a unknown territory. European fishermen and whalers had been coming here for 100 years. This chart was drawn by Champlain 2 years before the Popham colony showed up. Um, Champlain had done a lot of exploring in the area. The other thing is the natives were quite used to the Europeans in that they made use of the small boats left behind by the fishermen when they would go home seasonally. And the journal describing the trip over, on two separate occasions, they meet Native Americans in shallops. And the way I look at it is it either means some of the sailors on the boat had been here before, and so they knew they would see Native Americans in shallops, or how's a common sailor supposed to know that an Indian isn't supposed to be in a shallop? But by 1607, um, this area was known. I don't want to say well known, but it was known by the Europeans and the English. In fact, the Popham colonists had kidnapped 5 Native Americans from the Pemaquid area 2 years earlier. And they lived, so, 3 of them lived with Popham and 2 of them lived with Gorges. And one of them, on a failed attempt to start the colony up the year before, was returned to Pemaquid. And the other one, Skidwares, came with the 1607 fleet. Next slide, please. And this is just an aerial view of where the colony was. They really weren't sure of where it was until the 1990s. They'd even looked in this area without finding any artifacts. They'd looked in other areas, but it wasn't until the 1990s where they dug in this area again that they actually found artifacts proving that the colony had been here. And it really was amazing because the colony only lasted 1 year. This land had been farmed, and then the military had a base on it during World War I and World War II. So it's amazing to think that just 1 year's worth of inhabiting it would have left artifacts. Next slide, please. And one of the things that helped them rediscover where the colony was is this little map was discovered in the 1880s in Spanish archives. The Spanish ambassador was a really good spy in London, and he sent information back to the King of Spain. And this, in his papers in the 1880s, this map was discovered. Another thing that was discovered was a letter from the ambassador to the king saying, you don't have to worry about this colony. They quit, but you still need to wipe out the other colony. And what he was referring to when he said the Spanish need to wipe out another colony is he was referring to Jamestown. Now, this map is got a very strange shape to it, which is very un-English. The English are very, very anal, and they like very geometrical forts. Well, this fort fits on the piece of land, and that was how they started doing their dig. One of the things, and I'll have a picture next, is they discovered the storehouse, and once they discovered the storehouse, they could use this map to plot out the rest of the archaeological dig. You'll see off to the left a small boat, which scales out to be about a 30-ton pinnace, sprit rigged, and I'll get back to that. But this whole map is about the size of a large postcard. And this little tiny pinnace was one of the things we used for designing. Next photo, please. Next slide, please. This is the storehouse that they managed to locate. And once they located this, they really could use the map using the scale on it to find other things that it were exhibited on the map. Next slide, please. And among other things that they found, and trust me, they tell me that's a caulking iron. But on the left of that picture is a caulking iron. Iron tends to expand greatly when it starts to rust. But we like to think that's a caulking iron on the left, and on the right is robes or burrs. In other words, washers that would go on a rivet and you'd peen them over. And the square was very common because you'd take a piece of flat bar and just punch holes in it, and then also uh, punch a cut mark so you could snap off your robes. Next one, please. And this is a blow up of the pinnace that is on the map, and this was sort of a starting point for us. Uh, the great big sail is called a spritzel, and that form of sail existed till the end of commercial sail. That great big spritzels existed on the great big Thames barges that would sail the Thames in England and then out into the ocean. The sprit rig existed in commercial fishing in Casco Bay in Maine in the 1800s. And the advantage there was while you're pulling up your pot, you didn't have to worry about a boom cracking you in the back. And like everything on a boat, one thing benefits it, the other thing is sacrifices something. But the sprit rig existed until the end of commercial sail, commercial fishing. Next slide, please. Okay, for designing the boat, we had a design uh, that we weren't thrilled by. And so one of the volunteers spent, I swear to God, a couple thousand hours researching this boat and designing it. And his background was uh, he was a hotel owner. But I really do feel that his design, sure, there may be something here and something there, but I really do feel that his design would be recognizable to a 1600 English shipbuilder. In the journal, it's a 30-ton pinnace. The 30-ton is an extremely useful measurement. The king's taxman was playing a trick on us, and he went down to the harbor and he tried to figure out how do you tax a cargo. Well, the cargo he found, and every barrel had a different name by size. A butt was 126 gallons. You had hogsheads, you had puncheons, firkins. Every size had a different name. Well, a ton was a 252 gallon barrel, and this boat had 160 of these 252 gallon barrels. And that's how he came up with the math for uh, taxing a boat. But that gives you the length of the keel, the beam, and the depth. And so we started with that. Next slide, please. The other thing, and actually this isn't a good example, but at this time period, paintings were like a photograph. Now I realize this one isn't like a photograph, but if you look at it, it has the whole rig that we have on our boat. The sprit, the lateen, uh, the bowsprit squaresail, the topsail, um, and I. This is like one picture on a painting of 100, and it's the only one there that looks like this. So even at that time period, it was a bit rare. But you can find paintings that are as good as a photograph. Next slide, please. And this is John Bradford, the hotel man. He went and he took an old fashioned way of drawing a set of plans and did it for the Virginia. Now, we had to learn Shakespearean English because we had to deal with the rising line alow and the rising line aloft and the narrowing line alow and the narrowing line aloft. And they're really basically simple when we figured it out. You're basically talking about the shear line, or really a foot below the shear at the widest point of the boat. And you're talking about the head of the floor timbers. Um, and at this point, the architect would hand it to his 14-year-old apprentice and say, okay, draw on all the other frames. Next slide, please. And this is one of the other things at this time period is there are a number of books written on how you mathematically design a boat. My feeling is these books were written for the rural gentry who just like to learn about everything. I don't imagine these were really trade manuals for the shipwrights, but it's these series of arcs put together to come up with the largest frame, which was called the midship bend. Next slide, please. And I throw this in because they would have sent the rope with them. They would not have sent them to Maine and expected them to grow a crop of hemp and make rope. Why would they do that when the rope was easily available there in England? Next slide, please. Same thing with the iron. We don't believe they did an awful lot of iron work there. As I say, you're not going to send somebody to dig for gold, and the first thing you do is tell them, well, first you have to dig for iron and make a pickaxe. They had plenty of iron there in England, and so that would have been sent along. We were importing sails from England even up into the American Revolution, so they would have sent the sails. Next slide, please. Well, I'm sorry, wasn't the slide I expected. This is a picture of the tools they would have used. This is actually a Swedish tools, but basically they're the same. In fact, one of those rules in there is called an English ruler. This is the tools they would have built the boat with. Next slide. And I'm sure most of you have seen these. This is where they would have, taken the shapes from the existing trees. The boat, I guess next slide, the boat, the Virginia, oh, I want to make you guys jealous. This is a advertisement from the 1850s of what you could buy in downtown New York City, including a 60-foot keel with a little bit of the root still on it for your what's the Philadelphia boat? The Gazella Premier. Yeah. That boat has a keel like that. Next slide, please. We when we were getting started, and we're still raising money, and we're trying to figure out what should we do. We had a bunch of high school kids build this pinnace here. So the summer before we really got anywhere started on the Virginia, these kids built the pinnace. Because like I'm sorry, I'm calling it a pinnace. They built this shallop, and that was that common boat that was found all up and down the coast. The journals by the boat coming over referred to them as Basque shallops or Spanish shallops. The Micmac had taken a bunch of shallops 2 years earlier and sailed down and attacked an Indian village at Saco in a fleet of shallops. Next slide, please. And finally, we're getting to building it. We got a lot of we got the mast locally. Some of them down in Phippsburg, pretty near where the original boat was built. Some of them came from the Bowden Pines when a windstorm blew them down. But we got a bunch of pines for the mast. Next slide, please. And some of our guys like to do it with hand tools. And this is Fred Gosby. And he made most of the spars, for the most part, using hand tools. He really enjoyed doing that. Next slide, please. And here's another one. I think you're using a draw knife, and that was the sprit. Next slide, please. I thought this one was earlier. The rule of thumb was that 10 shipwrights could build 1 ton of vessel. Remember, a ton is a volume. 10 shipwrights could build 1 ton of vessel a day. So that means to build the 10 shipwrights could have built the 30-ton pinnace in 30 days. That just discourages the hell out of me. Fascinating thing about sawing out by hand, and it's still being done in places, is I've never seen anything. They always says how many feet a day. It never seems to matter how big the beam is or what the species of wood is. Next slide, please. Oh, they didn't bring any idling power units, as they're called, at the Maine Maritime Museum. The Maine Maritime Museum has a couple of oxen resting, and the caption is idling power units. But again, these people would have had to have done all this with their own power and built a town and built a fort and explored and tried to come up with food. Next slide, please. And we started, the same time they were building the shallop, we started building, framing the boat. This is what's called the midship bend. It's not going to be the midship, but it's going to be the greatest one. And that was there we are starting it up. You'll also notice that we are building it double sawn frame. They would have built it loose futtock. And by loose futtock, I mean they just would have put in a curved timber and then put another curved timber and then another. They wouldn't have done all this doubling like we do. And this was already being started in the 1600s. But the difference is a loose futtock vessel was built by artists. A double sawn vessel is built by craftsmen. And in fact, it would have been the apprentices, the 16-year-old apprentices who would have been cutting out the frames. Next slide, please. And this is a photograph of a boat being built in 1938 in Florida, and it is built loose futtock. That is not built double sawn. One way to tell is the immense spacing between the frames. But that, even in the late 30s, they were building loose futtock in Florida. Next slide, please. And here we are starting to assemble it. it was all volunteers. Even I was a volunteer. And here we are assembling the bow. Next slide, please. And I include this one. We are using an big electric drill to drill uh, the deadwood back in the stern. Um, and one of the reasons we took so long to build this boat is we were handicapped by electricity. Electricity makes us lousy woodworkers. Now, let me give you an example. I will take an electric drill motor. I'll put a dull drill bit in it. I'll drill it in until it jams, and then I'll try to pull it out, and the drill motor will come off the drill bit. And then I'll struggle to get the drill motor attached to the drill bit, and I'll fail, and then I'll have to go get a pair of vice grips and work this bit out. Well, before electricity, uh, your drill bit would be sharp. You would know there's no metal been put in this area that you're going to hit, and you would do a dozen rotations, clear the hole. A dozen rotations, clear the hole, and that was how they did that kind of work before electricity. A slightly similar thing, but it does include electricity, is we were putting new keel bolts in the Harvey Gamage, which meant drilling through 12 inches of cast iron. And there were two very good workers, but not experienced shipwrights, but two very good workers. And they worked at that. And in 2 weeks, they got one 12-inch hole drilled. So that's 160 man hours to get one hole drilled. Well, one of them had to go back to another job. And so I went down. I was like, I don't know. But I just thought about the few things I'd learned and basically just keep tightening the chuck, keep clearing it. And two of us got the next 1 foot hole drilled in 2.5 hours. So it was 80 hours without really the knowledge, but getting in real trouble because of using electricity, and 2.5 hours just because I knew a couple of the tricks. Next slide, please. Just picture the volunteers. The guy in the forward there is a doctor. The guy in the stern is a sign painter. I had cooks, I had gardeners, I had ambulance drivers. I had a lot of people. I don't think I had more than one or two people who ever collected a paycheck as a woodworker, but that's all right. We had fun. Next slide, please. And we steamed the planks, which would not have been done in 1607. My understanding is steaming planking here in the United States would only have happened around 1750. They would heat the plank up by running it over a fire. And one of these days I have to try that to see how it works. But we use steam. Next slide, please. And here we are hanging the planks. Again, these are all volunteers. A couple of things I regret is I never got to use diminishing batten on marking out the planks. And a diminishing batten is a pattern board, and it'll tell you how wide the plank is at every frame. And it's the best thing ever. You don't need a tape measure to plank, the Irving Johnson if you use a diminishing batten. But what I would like to know is that at this time period, they would not have been using planks that were all the same width at every location. And so I would love to know how they figured that out, or if again we're just getting back to they were artists and not craftsmen, and they just knew how much of each area to fill up with planking. Next slide, please. And we got volunteers from the Navy ships. Uh, we got volunteers from the Navy ships would come and work with us. And here he is driving a trunnel. Next slide, please. And again, the bow, the garboard in the stern in about 7 feet twists, I'd say 70 degrees. And I assumed we were going to break a dozen of them. We didn't break a single one, steaming either the bow or the stern garboard in. Next slide, please. Um, I'm curious. I always believe that the shape of a plank uh, sort of tells you if you've got the boat designed correctly. Um, and our boat, the planks, as you can see, the garboard just climbs right up the stem. And to get it to work, I had to put a joggle plank. And that's the name I've heard for a steeler, but in the bow rather than the stern. In other words, where you're seeing, 5-inch wide opening, I think by the time we get aft, it's 16 inches wide on that plank. But I'm curious. I think we need to build another one and test out theories on how you plank a hull shape like this. Next one, please. And Andros Kipagouris, I imagine a lot of you know him, saved our butts because our caulking seams were not the best. And by the time we got around to caulking it, we had to spline it. And Andros just came and caulked away and caulked away and caulked away. And he got the hull nice and tight for us. The next slide, please. I stole this. This is Sam Manning. The This is his drawing about trunnels, and the majority of our fasteners are trunnels, wooden nails at the ends of the plank. If it's below the water line, we used silicon bronze. If it's above the water line at the ends of the planks, we use stainless because stainless is cheaper and you don't have to worry about it deteriorating above the water line. And I even did things like I used wrought iron for the knees, big 30-inch lengths of wrought iron. And thank God this is an educational vessel because if it doesn't work, I'd say, oh, that's all right. It's an educational vessel. But I've done boats where we've used your regular galvanized, 5/8 rod, and it doesn't last, whereas wrought iron should. So we will see. A couple of tricks to people out there who may be getting into boat building or people running a crew is one of the first places I worked when the boss said, I guess you can do it that way. That means you've just done it the stupidest way possible. What I used with my volunteers is I says, well, it's an educational vessel, which also means that's the stupidest thing I've seen. But you may find time to use that with your volunteers. Next step, please. Next slide, please. And again, I stole this from Sam Manning. Caulking, I'm sure most of you know what it is. We did put one strand of cotton in, which would not be accurate because until the Eli Whitney and the cotton gin, cotton was a luxury and you would not be wasting it on a boat. The rest of it was oakum, and there's a good chance they would have been using oakum. I've recently found that they were using goat hair in London, which is where the lead shipwright was from. But maybe John there can put some goat hair in the deck and see how it goes. Next slide, please. Oh, and I'm going to say I'm going to say one other thing that I could not figure out how to do is the paying the caulking seams. should have been done with a mop, like just spinning a mop with hot tar. I could not figure out how to do that. So we did end up using a modern chemical above the water line for the caulking seams. This is not the Virginia, but I threw this in there because we this on the left of the picture is a knee. In fact, there's a little foot of a knee on the very front of that. We put something like 60 knees in the Virginia. Next slide, please. And this is looking from the stern. And up until about this time, people would ask me, how long is the boat? And I would honestly say, I don't know. And of course, they're like, what do you mean you don't know? It says, I don't know how long the boat is. Well, uh, the deck of the stern extends past the lower transom. And until one of our shipwrights decided where he wanted that to end, I didn't know where the end of the boat was. Next slide, please. And here we are laying the deck. I will again say this is something I wish I'd done differently. These are all 3 by, if not, and uh, I wish I'd gotten much wider stock because even with this, we weren't ending up with quarter sawn wood, which is shrinks and swells the least with your quarter sawn grain. And so I would have liked to have just gotten wide planks and with random widths because everything in the boat, the planking, the decking, the bulwarks, all should have been the futtocks, which actually we did use random widths, all should have been random widths. Thank you. Next slide. Oh, and did I say that was Women's Shipbuilding Day? And uh, most of the people there were old guys with beards looking like me. And it's a bit intimidating to come in there and volunteer. They didn't realize that, like I say, these people were all cooks and gardeners and what have you. But so we had one day a year, we had a women's shipbuilding day, and it was just a bunch of women. Whoever signed up would come, and we'd teach them something about shipbuilding. And we got some of our best volunteers from that. The ambulance driver, who's not in this picture, a woman named Gail, was my best volunteer. But don't tell her I said that. And that in the middle is Cynthia. She is another of our volunteers. Next slide, please. Laying the deck. And again, like I say, I wish I'd done it random widths. It is random widths, but a lot wider than we ended up doing. Next slide, please. I had thought this was our rigger when it was a small picture. I had thought that was Jim Nelson. He is our lead rigger, and again, he's a volunteer. And there's probably 5 or 6 other volunteer riggers who work with them, and they've made the whole rig. And as much as possible, um, I mean, we're trying very hard to make it accurate. It is not hemp; it is modern fiber because dealing with hemp and it's shrinking and swelling in the weather would have been too much. And the sails are not natural fiber either. Um, again, that would have been a little too much. Um, and next slide. Oh, we made a model so they could test out the different ways of rigging the sail plan. And because, these are a bunch of older American men volunteers. So we just listened to the one person who knew what they were talking about, and everybody else did exactly what they were told. I'm kidding. That did not happen. Uh, Next slide, please. Oh, here we are getting ready for launch. And you don't see it in this rudder, but the information is that the stern edge, the after edge of the rudder, should probably be a third again as wide as the leading edge of the rudder.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have a couple sources that say this. Um, I know on tugboats, you'll have the after edge of the rudder wider than the forward edge. Uh, I know in a Viking rudder, the after edge is wider than the forward edge. Um, John will have to say if he thinks that helped, hurt. Any idea, John?
Oh, she steers fine with that rudder. It's a
Yeah,
matter of the propeller aperture that's the problem.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Uh, the other reason, I wanted to really include this painting picture. Um, just like I say, I wanted the futtocks to be as they came from the mill. I wished our planking was more as the widths that the piece of wood could give us. I would not let them use tape to mark out these chevrons. I did end up letting them tape the primer coats, but I insisted that they paint the finished job with with uh, just a steady hand. And I just think you're trying to make something. You're trying to make it look like a really top notch 1607 boat, not a top notch router and tape and what have you 2015 boat. But I'm happy with the way it came out. I was worried at first that these chevrons were a figment of imagination of one of the guys designing it. But then we found paintings from the 1580s of of English boats in the against the Spanish Armada with
Yep.
these chevrons on it. And what I like to point out to people is, they go and they ask about the boat. I say, it's a UPS truck. There is nothing special about this boat. And they say, well, look at all the painting. And I say, well, look at the semis going up and down the highway with tons of extra lights and chrome and pinstriping and everything. People like to decorate their tools, and probably you attracted a better crew because it attract people who were proud of their boat. But like I say, it was a UPS truck, and it sailed when they shut the colony down. It sailed to London, and the designer loved to say, "Well, what does that prove?" Well, it proves nothing. They just wanted to go home. But the same people then sailed it from London to the Jamestown colony. That proved that people who knew the boat would willingly cross the Atlantic in it. And at that point, it gets mentioned maybe 6 times in different journals. And people always say, well, just because the boat's called Virginia doesn't mean it's our Virginia. Well, fortunately, one of the journals says the boat built in the northern colony. So we do know that the Virginia, went to England, came back to um, Jamestown. Very likely went through a hurricane that wrecked a couple other boats in the fleet, and then it just plain disappears from history at that point. I think there's one more picture. Oh, 2 more pictures. We built right parallel to the river. I wanted to side launch this boat so much. Um, I had wanted to side launch the Dennis Sullivan so much, was 3 times this size, and people just would not let me do it. So we brought in these 2 cranes. This is Ben Keeley, and Ben Keeley gave us quite a deal. He actually had to move the boat 3 times, 3 days, and reposition the boat. And so there she is with the two cranes attached. And one of the high school kids who had built the shallop way back when and had helped with making the midship bend frame, christened it, which was pretty neat. That makes me think about the educational part. Um, we are probably 38 ton rather than 30 ton. And the reason for that is uh, we needed to be bigger so we could put a full school classroom on board. The Coast Guard requires so much square feet per person, and we couldn't, we had to be bigger than the 30 ton. I think a lot of the difference is we're probably a 3 foot beamier. We probably should only be 13 feet. We're 16 feet. I imagine she's a little deeper in the hold and maybe a little longer, but I think the biggest thing is the beam. Last slide, I think. And there she is sailing. This is off of Popham. No, a little bit up the Kennebec. But we've gone her up and down the Kennebec a lot of times. That's the shallop that's being towed. And John has captained it most of the time. I don't go out on the stupid thing. I get seasick just holding a glass of water, so I'm not foolish enough to go out on it. But we've gone to Booth Bay, Pemaquid, Portland, South Freeport, what have you. And she's in she had spent her winters in Wiscasset, which was fantastic, but they had to take the floats in this year. So she's wintering in South Freeport because she can't deal with the ice in the Kennebec. And one of the first times I ever met Jim Sharp was when I was working on the Bowdoin in January in the Kennebec, and the ice was just slamming into the Kennebec. And he came and towed us practically without warning down to Boston when I swear it was 15 degrees below zero. But anyways, that's about it. Any questions?
I'll leave this photo up for a little bit. If there's questions, or John, do you have stories to add?
Now, I'm a newcomer to this, multi-decade process. I volunteered for about a year, and then other things came up, and I just couldn't do it anymore. But she actually sails pretty well. She's reasonably maneuverable. I don't know, despite the attentions of a number of very smart people, we really don't have the sails trimmed to maximum efficiency. They're awfully baggy. They were made by a traditional sail business up in Appleton. They're lovely sails. I think we treat the rigging as builders quite well. The maintenance going forward is a question that I worry about a little bit. One of her processes this coming year will be to haul out again and pull the mainmast to comply with the careful inspection of spars on passenger vessels. She passed stability quite well, despite the fact that she's not very deep and has a rather tall rig. The topsail you see in this picture that's not set has been set, and it's an extremely useful sail. She tacks, she wears. J.B. Smith has taken her several years to the Booth Bay Windjammer Days event, or Booze Bay, as we sometimes call it. She's really pretty handy, and having those high bulwarks makes her easy to work. Like a lot of traditional vessels, you could say she is so not a passenger vessel. When you come to tack, every square foot of deck space is occupied with somebody tending some line. And I think the rigging crew and the sailing crew have got a pretty good understanding as to how she operates. I think the The ultimate goal would be someday, provided that she finishes a rather exhaustive process of being certificated to carrying passengers under sail, more than 6 at a time, would be to go to Jamestown and catch up with some of her sisters and say, hey, this is the vessel that was actually here, without any question. And but she turns out to be a good a dockside educational tool for school groups. Matt, who's on the Zoom, is working very hard on getting that set up. She's a great vessel. The ongoing maintenance of it is always a challenge. How to develop a program that would keep her in the kind of shape she was in this picture. But all's good. There are a number of incredibly skilled people. I was somewhat taken aback by the expertise of all these people. Some of them are ex-Maine Maritime types, BIW executives, engineers, electricians, carpenters who can, oh yeah, let's make a ladder that looks this way. And sure enough, comes out with oak, all beautifully done. And she's a wonderful project and deserves the support of anybody who has the time or the resources to look into this.
The pine mass, are you hearing me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. All right. The pine mass, all the spores of pine, we had to get special permission to use pine. It's not one of the woods the Coast Guard currently allows. So fortunately, the Coast Guard found a book by Sam Manning on the King's Broad Arrow. In other words, all the white pine in the state along the water belonged to the king. And it's so much funny that 250 years later, the king was used, that was helped made England this empire, worldwide empire, was their access to white pine. But it's no longer on the list of what you can use.
John, I have a question for you. How many goats would it take to use to caulk that deck with goat hair? How many thousands of farms would it take to have
Yeah.
enough goats to
Jim,
do
I
that?
don't think they want old goats, so I think you're exempt.
I think that's marvelous. What a wonderful undertaking. I can take my hat off to you. That's really a fabulous thing to do. And it must have taken an enormous amount of patience to herd those volunteers around and get them to do just the right thing with what you're, just limited amount of stock to make mistakes on. You've got to do it right.
Well,
And
one of the things is I love doing this kind of job. I say this all the time, but if I build a yacht, I make one family happy. I do this, and all the people who volunteered to come build it, all the people who can come and actually lay their hands on it while we're building it, and just the people who will get to sail it, and the people who will watch you go up and down the river. I mean, I love doing this kind of project, and let's be honest, I'm too clumsy to work on a varnished boat. I'd scratch it.
Gentlemen,
well,
can I say
great job.
something?
Please do.
There's a farm in Minot, Maine, who raises mohair goats for roving, and we fiber enthusiasts buy it already in long strands, and it must be exactly what you're referring to, except we call it mohair. And mohair is much more expensive than wool roving, but know that it is available in Maine, and Catawampus Farm actually mills it at their facility. So going forward, you might want to talk to them if you need some.
That would be
That's
fun.
wonderful.
It would be
the,
fun.
the next boat I get, I want it to be a goat boat.
There you go.
Don't get it wet.
If I could jump in quickly, Rob, thanks for the great presentation. It was great to learn some of the history behind some of the stuff. My name's Matt Blazik. I'm actually the Director of Educational Operations for Maine's First Ship. If you'd like to see any of our upcoming programs for the next year, we're going to be announcing them very soon, either through our Facebook page, which is just Maine's First Ship on Facebook. We also have an Instagram account, and we do post things to our website, mfship.org, where you can find out all about the educational programs we do and ways to be able to actually get aboard Virginia for a tour or to sail on her when we have our open public sailing days, which we're hoping to do a few more of those next summer. So they sell out very quick, though. So I'll put the link to the webpage in the chat for everybody if they want to check it out.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to keep in touch. That would be good. Any other questions? Well, I guess I'll share my screen and we'll go back to the finale here. Just as a recap, I just wanted to show you very quickly all of the different captain's quarters presentations that we've done all the way back to back in 2020, and all the different vessels and so on, all the way down to presently 2024, and of course 2025 down at the bottom there, January 7th. Rob Stevens' wonderful, wonderful presentation on Maine's First Ship. Don't forget, January 21, Captain Alex Peacock will be telling us all about the schooner Bowden, the vessel of Maine, and its 35th voyage north. 35 was at age 103. It's really an amazing vessel. Amazing. It's going to be an amazing presentation. So stay tuned. Keep a membership with our schedule. I want to tell you, if you're looking for a good read, my book with Reckless Abandon, 40 Years of Voyage, and my memoirs, and some of it's even based on truth, you know. If you need a read, that's something that would be quite valuable. What's that? My wife's shouting at me. What's that, babe?
Right, I got a call, so don't even call me again.
Thank you all. We couldn't do it without you. Please go to our website, get familiar with all the things that we do, and donations and help gratefully received. So, any other questions? Anyone else have a word to put in here? You're welcome to. If not, we'll call it a night. And we thank you all for watching.
Thank you,
And
Jim.
thank you all.
Thank you, Jim. It was a lot of fun.